If we look back in time in our lives, we may find that activities we once enjoyed no longer hold any interest for us. For example, growing up, I was passionate about Alabama football, then baseball, then cars, then rocking out to my favorite bands. Today, I rarely think about baseball. My car, which I do love, is just a means of transportation, and I prefer listening to podcasts or TED Talks. Now, of course, some things remain the same. I am still passionate about Alabama football and am extremely happy about the outcome of the national championship game. But I would have to assume that winning keeps the passion burning there. As my interests have changed, so too have the products I shop for and the brands that I purchase. Part of this change in my shopping behavior is due to the aging process. I didn't worry about eating healthy when I was younger, but today I must. In the past, I didn't worry about how a product was made or how it was grown, but today I do. Well, at least somewhat. In the past, I considered the concept of value as meaning that something was less expensive. Today, value holds a completely different meaning for me and is the theme of this week's discussion. Welcome to week 2. This week, we are going to look at consumer behavior from a strategic perspective. First, we will look at how consumers see value, and then examine the consumer value framework, which gives us an overarching structure for our study of consumer behavior. In our second lecture, we're going to look at consumer behavior from a manager's perspective, specifically when we look at segmentation. We can look at value as a personal assessment of what we receive from an activity or a product. When making a purchase, we have basically decided that we are getting as much or more than what we are giving up in trade. The stronger the perceived value, the more likely we are to purchase this brand again in the future when the need arises. If the brand doesn't measure up, then the likelihood of repurchase diminishes to near zero, except in those cases where another viable option is not available. It is important to note that the actual price paid for a product is only a part of the value equation, as a consumer can obtain value even when spending tens of thousands of dollars. For example, several years ago, my 80-year-old dad called to tell me he had bought a new car, an Equus, which was the forerunner of the Genesis luxury line from Hyundai. Now, my dad has always been a well-known miser in the family, and I was a bit shocked that he spent $65,000 for a new car, given his age, and how little he actually drove. Now, of course, I was being a little selfish and hoping that he would pick a color that I would like to drive someday, but, he was very pleased with his purchase. Now, of course, we almost always perceive high value immediately after a purchase such as this. But he called me again the next day to inform me that the salesperson had stopped by his house to drop off the owner's manual, which turned out to be an iPad that had the owner's manual installed on it. And after explaining to him what an iPad was and what he could do with it, the value my dad perceived from his new car increased dramatically. So we can state that value is basically the difference between the benefits one gains minus the overall cost one incurs. And the decisions we make are mostly made based on how well our choices deliver the highest level of value. What's important is that consumers differ in what they value. For example, think about where you shop for groceries. Why do you shop there? Why do you like to spend your money there instead of a competitor? The answer is going to lie is in the total benefits that you're getting minus the price that you're paying for your groceries. But there's more. If we look at what's referred to as retail food stores, there are 6 basic shopping channels that consumers use for purchasing groceries. You have typical supermarkets such as Publix, a supercenter like Walmart, limited assortment stores such as Aldi or Save-A-Lot, fresh format stores like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, convenience stores like Parker's, and club stores such as Costco or Sam's. With all these choices, what determines which store people shop? We could argue that location, store aesthetics, price, selection, and quality are key factors in one's decisions. To some, fresh organic products is one of the most important, which leads to this group to prefer shopping at grocers such as Whole Foods, even when this location is less convenient and prices are higher than competing retailers. To this segment, though, the product quality benefit far outweighs the overall cost. Of course, many consumers will use 2 or more of these store formats. This conception of value is our starting point for the consumer value framework. Marketing managers must understand what drives customer value, and the consumer value framework is a good representation of consumer behavior theory because it illustrates the factors that shape our consumption behaviors and also determine what we value in our choices. Let's take a closer look at the framework. From my perspective, everything begins with the consumption process, which involves processes related to our pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase activities. The consumption process is affected by both external and internal influences. These will be the central focus of the remainder for this course. But before looking at the influences, the consumption process and a basic look at 2 types of value will be touched upon. Consumption is the process by which consumers use goods, services, or ideas and transform that experience into value. As a field of study, consumer behavior represents the study of consumers as they go through the consumption process. As stated earlier, the process is separated into pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase issues, and these represent the consumer decision-making process. All of these will be discussed in greater depth throughout the remainder of the semester. While there are numerous types of value, we will focus on 2 specific forms, utilitarian and hedonistic value, in building our consumer value framework. On the whole, we can state that utilitarian shopping is all about meeting actual needs and functions, while hedonistic shopping is driven solely by our desire for fun and entertainment. Marketers must understand that consumers react very differently depending on whether the product in question is being purchased for utilitarian or hedonistic consumption. Let's take a look at these a little bit more closely. For most of our purchases, we are looking to solve some problem that we have. Your car warns that you're low on fuel and you begin to look around for a gas station. Or the washing machine breaks, so you call a repairman. These types of purchases are made with a rational reason in mind. These consumption instances provide us with utilitarian value. Other purchases, though, often made without a rational reason, are made not based on the functional aspect of the product or service, but rather what feeling or emotions we gain from their consumption. This type of consumption is made based purely on hedonistic values that it provides. For example, think about the emotions and feelings you have when you spend time on social media, go on vacation, or purchase a very expensive item. These things are being consumed from a hedonistic value. It's not saying that it's wrong. That's just how we define those type of activities. So now let's look at what influences the consumption process and the values that we're talking about. Internal influences, such as consumer psychology and personality, can have a profound effect on an individual's consumption process, their concept of value, and it also has implications on the relationship quality that occurs between consumers and brands. When most people think about consumer behavior, they immediately gravitate towards psychological influences. The psychology of a consumer involves both cognitive and affective processes. Cognition refers to the thinking or mental processes that go on as we process and store things that can become knowledge. Affect, on the other hand, refers to the feelings experienced during consumption activities or feelings associated with specific objects. Our perceptions certainly shape how desirable we view view a brand, which in turn influences our decision-making process. And since value is a subjective assessment, it too is influenced by our perceptions. Successful marketers understand how psychological influences impact consumer decision-making, and they work to not overly tax the brain of the target market. For example, in the supermarket space, there are numerous competitors. Some seek to attract customers based on lower prices, while others seek to make the experience of shopping for groceries less taxing or even pleasant. Some consumers will prefer to shop for groceries based on paying a lower overall price, while others will select one based on the overall experience. These types of retailers have wide open spaces that make navigating through the store easy and the trip relatively stress-free. Shoppers willingly pay a higher price for a higher quality experience. No matter what, marketers must realize that the human brain has limits to what it will process, and when faced with too much information or require too much effort, some consumers will choose not to engage. For example, how many of you have seen a bin of movies like this one at Walmart? Many of you may identify a movie you want by the signage and will rummage through the bin looking for that movie. Another person may also see a movie that interests them, but takes one look at the effort required and keeps walking. For those who take the effort to dig through the pile, they get a movie they like for a great price. All of us have our limits, and a marketer must understand what these limits are. For example, I'm going to read off a list of 16 words. See if you can remember them. North, woman, summer, autumn, yellow, red, winter, boy, east, man, south, blue, spring, west, girl, green. Of course, this list could easily be remembered if the words were grouped together. We put it north, south, east, west, man, woman, boy, girl, autumn, spring, summer, winter, blue, green, red, and yellow. Makes it much easier to remember, correct? Now, of course, Walmart could neatly organize the movies on a shelf, but this requires a great deal of space, which would increase the cost that they have to incur. By putting the movies into a bin, they can maximize the space in their store. It's a little more chaotic, but some people have no problem taking the time to find what they're looking for. Others like the scavenger hunt mentality, and of course, others just keep walking. Another form of internal influence is consumer personality. Personality is defined as distinctive patterns of behavior, including thoughts and emotions that characterize each individual. It is these individual differences that make a person distinct from one another, and includes one's personality and lifestyle. For example, consumers with lifestyles oriented around technology are more likely to desire the newest smartphones and may often be found camping outside the store for days until it's released. Companies are spending a great deal of money now trying to figure out and harness individual differences in such a way as to be able to predict consumer choice. They have realized that individual differences, including motivations, which can trigger desire and also shape value experience by consumers. In keeping with that, here's my quote of the week from Michael Jordan. Some people want it to happen, some wish it would happen, and others make it happen. That's the difference when we think about personality. Researchers have also looked into the personality and how it influences consumers. For example, a couple of researchers from the University of Minnesota, they found that women who carried around a Victoria's Secret bag perceived themselves to be more feminine, glamorous, and good-looking than those who carried around just a pink bag. The researchers, what they did is they sat outside the mall and they gave women randomly either just a plain peak bag or a Victoria's Secret bag, and waited until they finished their shopping and gave them a couple of psychological tests, and this is what the findings show. In addition to internal influences, a consumer's beliefs, attitudes, and actions are also influenced by external forces. How much influence on the type of products and specific brands you buy exists due to your family and friends, or even members of your peer group? The influence is greater than you may think. One of my former students, upon graduation, took a job with a small startup company in California. Mark was an interesting guy and a good student. One of his hobbies, which he seemed to bring up in almost every in-class discussion, was brewing beer. He was passionate about the topic. He contacted me a few years after graduation regarding an issue his company was trying to solve, and I asked him how his home brew was going. I was surprised to learn that he had stopped brewing his own beer and had really switched to drinking more wine instead. I was puzzled. So I asked him, how did that happen? And it seemed that his boss was a self-described wine snob, and the company had many social gatherings several times a month, inviting clients and partners, and that the boss wouldn't even consider serving beer at these events. Whether it was the pressure from his peers or the boss, in time, Mark began to prefer wine. As noted, those around you can have a major influence on what you like, purchase, and consume. From the time you were born, your family and culture have imparted beliefs and preferences upon you. Your choices of food, for example, are heavily influenced by your culture. Growing up, my family ate a lot of meat and potatoes. But after marrying my wife, who was Chinese, my diet consists now more of rice than potatoes. As the example of Mark demonstrates, our peer groups also have an influence on the type of products we prefer. Can you imagine how the story might have been different if Harry had been sorted into Slytherin rather than Gryffindor? For one, he would have likely had more of a preference for the color green rather than scarlet. Of course, there probably would have only been one book, as I doubt Crabbe and Goyle could have offered him any help in getting past the task needed to reach the Philosopher's Stone. We are also influenced by our surroundings and various elements of time. Think about how we look at purchasing something we need for vacation, such as suntan lotion. We are more than willing to pay a higher price if we are already at the beach than if we are shopping close to home before we depart. The atmosphere of where we are also impacts our actions and attitudes. Restaurants, such as Chili's or Texas Roadhouse, need to move diners through quickly to turn the tables over as much as possible on their busy nights. Food is prepared relatively quick, and the music has a quick, upbeat pace, which causes people to eat faster. An upscale restaurant, on the other hand, turns over their tables fewer times each night, and they try to encourage people to stay longer. They play classical music and encourage people to order coffee and desserts just because what they're trying to do is, because they see fewer customers, they're trying to increase the amount per people, the amount that people spend per meal. In Lecture 2, we're going to look at the strategic issues managers face and how an understanding of consumer behavior is important. But first, let's take a look at perhaps the wave of future when it comes to grocery shopping.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.